Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I have the wonderful, I'm so excited, opportunity to bring on Miss Jessica Frew. I think I pronounced that right, correct?
You are 100% correct.
Perfect. I have butchered so many names. I'm not even, but I'm so excited to bring her on. I've been following her for a few years now, and just watching her progression and how freely she talks about all the things in her life. Like I'm really digging her hair. Like if y'all know, I used to rock a mohawk, but I don't do that much anymore because my hair is too long. But just the freeness with which she addresses topics that are difficult to talk about, that most people shove under the rug and just don't even, give it the time of day. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being on the podcast, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you and be able to have this conversation.
Yeah. So let's dig into what that conversation is, because I know it's all over your social medias. Like you are not shy at all to talk about it. So bring our audience in, clue them in as to what you're talking about.
Yeah. So my story, people are always like, tell your story. And usually the story they want to hear begins when I met my ex-husband. My ex-husband and I met in college, and it was like instant connection. We were together every day we could be. And we met in February, got married in December. And it was like, the first year of marriage, they always talk about, oh, it's the hardest. This is the hardest year of marriage. And we just didn't experience that. It just felt normal and right to just be living together and having all the things come together. And we were really, really happy. That being said, about 6 months into our marriage, I found some gay porn on our computer. Like I found porn, it just popped up. And as it's popping up, I'm realizing there are no women on here. Like there's not a single female in sight. And I was like, okay, I know some straight men probably are into this, but I knew deep in my gut that my husband was gay. And at that point, I asked him, like, are you gay? Are you? And he's like, no, I'm not gay. I just felt it was better to just look at men so that I didn't disrespect women. And he'd created this whole story in his head
Oh,
because he didn't want to own up to it. Like he wasn't ready to be honest with himself. We'd been raised in a very conservative Christian religion, and he just didn't see that as an option or a way forward or anything. And so I'm tucking this in the back of my head thinking my husband is definitely gay. And he's not ready to admit that, but I'm strangely at peace with this information.
right.
And it
It's
was
like,
like,
what do you do with this information?
yeah, yeah.
Like I have it, but now what?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like as we're talking about grief, I've thought a lot about this because I help women work through the grief of losing the life they thought they would have, which I think is
Yeah.
the main thing of grief is we had this vision of something or somebody being in our life,
Yeah.
and then we have to mourn this loss.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had like this little moment of mourning, of realizing this probably isn't going to be the life I had imagined for myself. This
Right.
probably isn't going to be the exact relationship that I had pictured. And so I always say like throughout my journey, I had little moments of grief
Mm.
and mourning of a huge thing. So we
Yeah.
continue forward. A couple of years into our relationship, he's at a counselor. He's going counseling for some things. And the counselor's like, okay, all of these things are issues, but the real issue is you're gay and you're not willing to accept that side of you or love that side of you. And until you do, you're not going to be able to deal with these other things. So he comes out to me at that point. We are open within our relationship of talking about that. to be clear, we didn't open up our relationship at that point. A lot of people go that route when they found out their partner's
Right.
gay or bi or whatever, and that's totally their decision. That wasn't our journey. But we continued forward, and we brought a little girl into our lives 5 years into our marriage. And then 2 years after she was born, Steve ended up having an affair. And that again was this big moment of like mourning and grief, obviously. And we tried to work through that. We tried to stay together, and it was just a mess, like such a
Because
shit
you're
show.
also trying to balance this relationship with your views of your Christian upbringing too,
100%.
correct?
Yeah.
Just like keeping the marriage together
Mhm.
because it's all purported, men and women marry
Yeah.
and they don't divorce, they stay
Mhm.
married forever, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
Wow.
was like a slow shift within our views of that too, of
Mm.
I Steve, my ex, was very much in the mindset that he could, pray it away. You always hear that, pray the gay
Yeah,
away and all those things. And he was in that mindset. And I'm like, no, babe, like, this is who you are. Like, this is deep in you. There might be
right,
a way for us to stay married for you to accept that and love that part of you, but I don't know. But really, until you embrace that, like his therapist told him at the beginning of our marriage, like until you accept that, like you're not going to be truly happy. And I very much was just like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing bad about this. You just need to embrace it in whatever way feels right for you. And after the
right.
affair, we were a mess, and we ultimately decided, we need to get divorced. Like this
Yeah.
is the time. And it's always interesting because when I talk about this, people are like, oh, well, it must have been a lot easier for you that he had an affair with a man, or it must be easier that it wasn't, uh, I don't know, like there's a dismissal of the grief process
Yeah.
there that is like, well, you can't know how painful it is for your partner to have an affair because he did it with a man. And and so
That
yeah,
that
I
just
bring
sounds
this.
ridiculous.
Yes, and I bring this up because I think we are dismissive of other people's grief so often because we can't comprehend it, or we have to compare it to something that we
To
understand and
justify
know.
it.
Yeah, and so we're trying to wrap our heads around it, and we're like, "Well, that must be easier,"
Yeah.
or or we can't understand how somebody's processing through it differently than we would, and
Yeah.
so we make those things put on there of like, "Oh, this
Hmm.
must be easier." Um, and so, I did go through a process of grieving and mourning, and because I'd done it for a long time, I entered into a new relationship very quickly. I got married a year and a half later. I've now been remarried for almost 11 years, which just
Oh,
blows my
dang.
mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that also is like part of the reason I can share so freely. People tell me, they're like, you make light of this deep, hard thing that people go through. And I'm like, yes, because grief is like mourning something and coming away from that. Like, we have to see that there's some light in it. Like, I understand how hard this is, and I speak to that in my coaching and in the things that we do. And also, we need to understand that there can be joy and light. Like, we get to carry both of these things,
Yeah.
and it's hard and it's weird, but like life continues, and we get to choose, how to embrace that. And we get to choose to feel that grief and feel the mourning and go through that process. And also, we can embrace the moments of joy that come along the way. And they might be fleeting and they might be short. Um, and I choose to show up very much in my social media more on like the light side. In fact, I've had a lot of people say, I'm hesitant to work with you because you're like very light and colorful and all those things. I'm like, don't get me wrong, I am light and colorful because I'm willing to feel the feelings on the other side of that. I
Yes.
am willing to help you feel those feelings. I understand all of this pain and everything. But I'm years out, and I have done this work, and now I'm at a place where I can share that. And I think that for me, well, and I will say, getting remarried, my second marriage has been like a whole nother form of learning grief and mourning. Because first of all, things from like what I thought my life was going to look like pop up again, of like, oh, I have to grieve this idea of my life again. And also I had to grieve what I thought mine and my current husband's relationship was going to look like, because holy crap, that for me was actually way harder than the divorce. But I think it's because I grieved the divorce along the way. Like, I grieved losing my
Yeah.
relationship for years.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden this marriage hit and I was like, I have lost myself completely in this new marriage. And having to like pull myself out of that and grieving what I thought it was going to look like. And that's usually when we lose ourselves, is because we're giving
Yeah,
ourselves away because we're trying to get what we thought it was going to look like. We're trying to make it look a certain way and we can't.
we're trying to be
Um,
a certain way. Yeah.
yeah. And so I had to grieve all of that and then come back to myself. And that's really been able to help Matt and I, my current husband and I, create a life that we love. And that is everything we were hoping for. At least it feels that way. It doesn't look like how we thought it was going to look in any way,
Right.
shape, or form, but it feels good. And
Feels
we can acknowledge those moments of grief and those hard moments and then be able to move forward. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my story and what I've been through. And then what I share is helping people. Mostly I help people work through betrayal and also come home to themselves. Like I think that's the power of all grief, or at least the grief that I have felt, is this like real connection to who I am on a
yeah.
very deep level. Um, because we're forced to be real with ourselves. We're forced to connect to
Agree
who
with
we are.
that.
So there you go.
Yeah. That yes, I agree on so many different points that you put out there. And I agree it's a choice. Like when you wake up, when you're in the midst of grief, like so my experience mainly comes from losing a child and losing a
Yeah.
grandchild. And so, the first couple months, like you're just in this numbness phase, like
Oh yeah.
you can't believe what's happened to you, and you're just trying to survive at that point.
Mhm.
Which I'm assuming like the betrayal and everything like that does too. Like
Mhm.
you're just trying to survive. Like, what do I do now? How do I fix this mess? Like, what's the next step? Like,
Yeah.
do I just burn it all down and walk away? Or do I like try to sew the tattered pieces together and make
Mhm.
something, some semblance of what, I thought it was going to be like?
Yeah.
And it's interesting on so many different levels, but we get to choose how we show up to our grief and how and your ex-husband was like shoving it under the rug and just pushing it
Yeah.
down and stuffing it and not dealing with it when eventually it's just like a volcano. It's just going to erupt
It erupts,
and
man.
come out, and it's never going to be pretty. It's never going to
Mm-mm.
be pretty when that happens.
Mm-mm.
And the grief is the same way. Like, I don't
Yes.
care what grief you're going through, it doesn't matter. And there's different levels and different depths and, all kinds
Yeah.
of circumstances. But um,
And I'm always so hesitant, like when we talk about like that choosing of those things. Like I know there is a phase where it's just like you are waking up and trying to make it
yes,
to the next thing. And and that's like not what we're talking about here. Like you're saying, like that deep numbness, that's a phase I think we all have to go through in that deep grieving process, is just that this is real. Like this extreme exhaustion and numbness and emotionally like being so overwhelmed that you can physically hardly function
right,
is real and necessary. And it's not just like we're saying you power through that or you
right,
like, yeah. And I know you speak to that, I'm sure, on
yes,
all of the levels, but I want to like, I always want to make that clear, is like that's not my message of like powering through, but it's finding those moments when we can take those conscious choices of like, okay, I feel a little lighter now. I feel
mhm,
like a little lightness today. What can I do with that?
yeah,
And like embracing those moments when they come. I think that there's so much power in just that little moment that gives us that reminder of hope. Like, okay, I can carry some of this together. I can still have some of this joy and the things I wanted in my life while also knowing this sucks. Like,
yeah,
and it's hard and it's real.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Like when you're in the midst of the motionless stuff, the
Mhm.
hard stuff, like you don't want to do anything but sit in it, at
Yeah.
that moment. And it's hard to find a way out. It's
Mhm.
hard to know what to do next. And it's, I just think that there's so much more work needed in these areas to help with the grief, to help with, the navigate and to make people feel like they're not alone. I think that's the
Hmm.
biggest thing because a lot of people, myself especially, I'm speaking about myself here. When I was in the middle of it, I felt alone.
Yeah.
Felt like I was sectioned off from the rest of the world. No
Hmm.
one knew how I was feeling because in my world, no one was going through it at that moment except for my husband and my family at that moment,
Yeah.
And everybody processes grief differently. Everybody, different levels, different styles, different everything.
Hmm.
But you don't reach out because then it's like the stigma of like, oh, you must not be able to handle it. You must
Yeah.
not, you must not have the mindset to be able to work through it. Like, oh, you poor thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm
And
like,
there's like, I was just listening to this past week, I've been listening to one of Brene Brown books again, Brene Brown's books
that's a
again.
tongue twister.
Yeah. And like speaking of like this empathy versus sympathy type idea, and I will never get it all right, but like the idea of true sitting with somebody instead of just pitying somebody
Right,
is a really hard thing to navigate. And often our friends want to be with us there and it comes across as like pity. And I'm like, I don't need pity right now.
right.
I know how crappy this is.
Yeah,
I just need to know I'm not alone, to have somebody sit with me or to have somebody be like, yeah, this does suck. And I can kind of relate. I know it's not the same. And also, like,
mm,
having and not comparing, but just
right.
embracing that, I'm here with you. I'm here with
Yeah,
you. And it's a hard thing to navigate as the
it is.
friend and the person in it.
Because I think a lot of people like when the silence comes, because that's generally what it is, the
Hmm.
silence, because nobody knows what to say in that moment. I mean,
Hmm.
hell, I've been through, a couple different instances in my life, and I still say the wrong crap.
Yes.
Still say the wrong words. I'm like, oh, how are you? Which is the stupidest thing to say because how do you think they are? They feel like crap.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you still, I think it's just for me, it's just like, oh, you just regurgitate these words because
Hmm.
that's so ingrained in you. You see people like, oh,
So
how are you?
ingrained.
How are you? How are
Yeah.
you? You know?
Yeah. And I think there's also like, I mean, when I ask people how they are, most people in my not life know, like, I want to know how
Yeah,
you are. Like, how are you
for
really
real, for
doing?
real, real.
My
Not
friend
just a
tried to
oh, I'm
tell me,
fine.
yeah, we went to lunch the other day and I was like, how are you? Because we've been talking about me. And she's like, oh, I'm good. And I look
Yeah,
at her and I'm like, bullshit. And we both
yeah,
just started laughing. I'm like, this isn't what I'm going for here. Like, give
right.
me, how are you? And so I think there is like this knowing of, okay, when you see somebody and it's somebody that you can go to that when you ask, how are you? They know, like, I
Yeah.
want to
There's
get
no
into it.
bullshitting here.
No, I
Don't
want to
give me some
know.
crap answer.
Yeah. We're at the grocery store and I ask how you're doing. Do you need me to finish your grocery shopping? Do you need me to
Right.
like take your kid right now and go sit in my car with them? Or like
Yeah.
what is like tell me how you're really doing. Um I don't know. There's just like that understanding and then yeah, choosing wisely. We're never going to do it perfect. And I think that's the thing is as the person supporting is like realizing I'm going to mess up, but messing up is probably better than not showing up at all.
Right. Or showing up
Um,
falsely, showing up in
yeah,
a fake way, or, just in a,
yeah,
this is what is expected of me. So here I am, but I don't really want to deal with your bullshit, but here I am anyway, and at the first
yeah,
opportunity, I'm going to go back to my own stuff. Those
yeah.
are the ones that are the worst. And I've had so many of those show up through the years. And I think all of us
Mm,
have. I know we have. And it's just for me, grabbing a hold of the ones that are the true ones that want to help and want to be there and understand
mhm,
and learning from them, and, trying to be a
yeah,
better person myself along the way as well.
yeah. And in this like loneliness, I
Mhm.
always think so one of the hardest things to do is to reach out or to find support. And I'm always like, and also if you can somehow get yourself to do that, to find a group that maybe it's a free support group, maybe it's a paid group, like find something and get in it. People are like, "Oh, I'm just too numb. I'm too emotionally heavy." And I'm like, "Okay, maybe like the first little bit I get that, but then like
Yeah.
reach out.
Yeah.
Find those people because it really does make a difference. Find those people who are because this is a thin line too of like there's like such negativity in
Yeah.
some of these groups. And
Yes.
so
Mm,
find one that brings some hope with it, not just focused on the negative. And also you want it to be real and a safe
yeah.
place to like, I am having the shittiest day ever and I just need to let it out. You go let it out. Like, yes, let's go. Release that. And also know that on the other side of that, people are going to be helping you like, all right, like, and not toxic positivity, but that like there's hope. Let's create the
Yeah.
hope in you too. Let's create a moment of joy after this really hard day, week, month, whatever. Let's find some moments of joy and positivity along the way too. It's a hard balance to navigate for sure.
I agree with that. Like it is a very hard balance, like being the giver and being the receiver. Like
Mhm.
I would rather give than receive. And that's that's my own issues. I
I
have
think that's most of us.
right?
Most
It's
of
like I
us.
don't want the attention showered on me because I just want to pretend like in my own little bubble, everything is great. And I just want to help others and be that light for someone else and deal with my own stuff in private.
Yeah. And I don't think that's all bad. I
No,
think
no, no,
that's
no. I
probably
don't think
really
so.
healthy for some of us, but
Mhm.
also then being real, like I process through things on my own. Like I'm very much
Yes.
I need to
Yep.
process on my own. And also I am willing to talk about you full on in detail after that. Like after I'm to a point where I've kind of processed through, I might still be in the thick of it. But after
Yeah.
I've kind of grounded myself, like, let's dive in. I will
Yeah.
tell you all the crap. And I will share that like try to share that on my social media of like today is hard and sucks. And I am back in this spiral of thinking. And I don't have to share all the details. I don't have to whatever. This is what I do is I dive into myself and then I'm moving forward um, to help. And part of that like creates space. Like it opens the door just a little bit. It doesn't have to be on social media. That's just
Right.
where I show up right now. But like it opens the door just a little bit to even receive some of that love back. And it allows a little space that if somebody does want to do something, they can. And I think about that like with my friend group of just being honest, like, I'm not going to show up today. I'm having a crappy day. Like, I don't need anything, but also sometimes it's nice to have that. And I think that as givers, which, like I said, I think most of us probably are on that side of things
Yeah.
of wanting to give and be a light and all of that. Um, I think by showing that we're allowing love into our lives in good times and hard times, it creates an example of like, listen, the love doesn't come until you create the space for that
Right.
and open yourself
Yeah.
up. And I was thinking about this a lot. Like, I just turned 40 this year and I had, well, like last month, I had a really big party and all of this and felt like so much love. Like, it was so overwhelming and it was so fun. But I was like, if I hadn't created that space, like if I hadn't opened that up for that, I wouldn't have felt that. I would have been like, oh, it's my 40th, nobody cares. No, no, like we can sit in
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, sometimes we got to be the creator of our own, like whatever it is we want.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking it a little bit, even just so that we can allow some of that to come in when we need to be the receiver.
Yeah.
'Cause, like on our birthdays, we do want to receive a lot of the time. I know not everybody's that way, but you want to
Right.
create the space for that. It's like one kind of like light, again, example, but kind of gets you thinking about other ways you can do that. And it's had me thinking ever since then of like, okay, how are ways that I need to receive, be allowed, like allowing myself to receive more on a day to day basis so that I don't fall back into like the anger and the bitterness and
Right.
whatever. And those are important. They tell us
That's very
things.
real. That's a
They
very
cue
real thing.
us.
Anger and the bitterness
Oh,
are
man.
they come and they sneak up, punch you right in the
Yes.
gut.
Yeah. And it's usually something that, like, we can kind of do something about, but we don't want to take, like, we don't want to take ownership that we can do something about, or something that we can receive that maybe's been offered to us and we keep shutting it down. I've realized
Yeah.
this, like, with my husband of like, I want him to show up more in our home, but also he's been trained that I do everything, like, because I
Yes.
did for so long and now I'm working. And
Amen.
so I need help. And I'm like, okay, I trained him to not do anything. And now when he offers like to do small things, I'm like, no, I can do that. I'm like, but if I don't allow him to do these little things, he's going to think I don't need help anywhere. And he's going to
Right.
continue in this pattern that I have put forward. So
Right. It's
now
like
I'm like,
I created
okay,
this problem. I need to find my
yes.
solution because I did the
Mhm.
same thing. My husband was in the
We all
military
do it.
and we were blending a family at the time with 5 children.
Oh,
And, he was
bless you.
gone quite a bit. And so I had to be, the caretaker. I had to be the financial person. I had to be the lawn care person. I had to be, all the things, the maid in the house, all the things. And and now it's like he's starting to help out more because he was the financial provider for the family,
Mhm.
because we had a big family. We couldn't afford to put the kids in daycare. That
Yeah,
was expensive.
yeah,
And so, you start doing these things and you're like, "Oh, I can do it. I can do it. I can do
I
it."
can do
And
it.
that's a pathway that can lead you down a bad road, because then you start taking on too much and you stress yourself out and you overwhelm yourself. And the next thing
Yes.
like, you're no good to anyone, not even yourself.
Yeah, and
But
also,
you
like,
are the solution to that problem, though.
yes, because you've trained everybody that you're tough. And, like, I think that, like, we think this is a sign of strength, like, "Oh, I'm
Yeah,
strong enough to carry this," which we are, and also it it wears us down to a
yeah,
point where we're back in the thick of that, like, what feels like grief, but really we're just angry and pissed at this point,
right. How did
because
this
we've tried
get
to
like
power
this?
through.
Why is it like this? Oh my God, why
Yeah,
can't you just help me? But it's like, how do I help you? You're doing
yeah,
everything. Like,
yeah.
where
You're
am I
not
supposed
creating
to?
that space.
Or if they do, they don't do it right, and then you have to redo it
Mm,
all the time, all it's just a negative path. So we're learning as well, how to bring more of him into the house and all of that.
yeah. And I think, like, this goes to when people offer help and support
Yes.
of, like, and I know it's hard when people say, "How can I help you?" Like, I know that with any type of grief, it's like, I don't know. Like, I can't think past this moment right here. I have no idea. And so it's
Right.
helpful when people show up and do things and whatever. And also, if we can, when somebody offers something small that seems small, say yes. That's like something that I'm right now in my life going to do more of. It's just like they offer this little thing. Well, could I do this for you? Sure. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. And just embracing, like, it might not be something I need, but to me, I'm realizing more and more that is the strength. That is us showing strength, is saying, yeah, that would be amazing. Like, please I would love for you to do that thing. Um,
I think a lot of that is too, like, letting people in. I think it's
yeah.
hard to let people in, and
Mhm.
when you've had to rely upon yourself for so long, it's a mechanism, trauma, all those things.
100%.
Um, it's hard to let people in because you feel like you're gonna be failed on or, all of
Yeah.
that stuff. That's very real feelings. And you're worried that and then you start worrying and stressing like, "Oh my gosh, well, then this and this." But I think that once you open the door to let people help you, and to let people in, if you choose to look at it a different way or whatever, instead of like it's a failure, if they're just gonna let me down anyway. Like, I don't even know why I did this and blah blah blah. That whole negative spiel you've got going on.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, well, who knows? Maybe something good will come of this. And maybe our bond will be strengthened. Maybe we'll actually have communication or whatever
Yeah.
it is. And who cares if they don't do it right? Like, it's done.
Yeah. And that's, I think we really have to let go of is, just
Control.
yes. And not saying, like, even if they didn't do it right, like sometimes I just am like, okay, I might like redo this little bit of how the
Yeah.
dishwasher got loaded. Like, it doesn't matter, it's still done.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather this be done and that they helped than
Right.
it be done perfectly and I have to, like, take care of, like, one little part of it. Like at
Right.
least the majority of the work has been finished or whatever. And really working towards that. And I make it clear, like, I'm appreciative that you did this work. Like if somebody sees me like moving one thing in the dishwasher, I'm like, I'm not mad. Like I'm not upset with
Yeah.
you. I am grateful you did this. And I'm
Yes.
just moving this one thing and it was amazing. You did a good job. Um, but I think that there's just a lot in, yeah, that we have to learn to release control and all of those things. So, opening space, like I just really think that that's such a vital part of grieving and mourning and all of that is just inviting, allowing there to be space. And that grows and amplifies over the years. Like it's not something we're going to have huge capacity for in the beginning when we're deep in the grief.
No. No.
Um People might be doing things, but it's like hard for us to invite that in. But they're doing things because things are need to get done that we aren't capable of doing in that moment. And so then realizing it's okay to let people keep doing those things when we feel capable is
Right?
huge. It's a
Instead of just
different,
taking them back, I'm like, okay, I feel better now. Give it back.
yeah,
Letting
yeah,
them hold it.
maybe, mm-hmm,
There was a moment, you were talking earlier, and I had this moment, this thought about, the giver and the receiver.
mm-hmm,
And like I mentioned that I like to be the giver
mm-hmm,
and I like to do things for other people. And you were talking about your party and your 40th birthday party and how you were
mm-hmm,
able to open that up and let people come give and pour back into you. That I think is extremely powerful because with even though I'm a giver, like it is
mm-hmm.
nice to receive and stuff too.
Oh my
And if
gosh.
you're not creating those opportunities for other people to pour back into you, eventually your giving well will run dry because you feel taken advantage of because
Yes.
but then again, it's a potentially you problem because you're not opening those doors to let other people. I just thought that was powerful. Um,
Yeah.
and so like going back to your divorce with your husband and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, like being able to be open with your friends and family and stuff about this so that they can pour into you when they see that you need it or even if you don't, when they just say, "Oh, I'm just gonna love on Jessica today. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna love on her today in a real authentic and real way and pour into her because she has done so much for me."
Yeah.
Like, those are the true connections.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, like in the divorce process, I almost feel like Steve and I kept those doors open to each other in ways.
That's
Like
good.
Steve and I are, I should have said, like Steve and I are still really good friends. Like we
Mhm.
get along, we are very much in each other's lives. Um, we host a podcast together. Like we're we're
That's
still friends.
fantastic.
But we created a lot of space for that with very boundaried at the same time because we were entering a new phase of our relationship. But I think there was like a choice that was made to open the door of like, I am grieving this relationship. I also love and care about this person. And so I'm going to focus on the love that he's able to give me right now, or like the good
Mhm.
parts that I need still and let
Right.
go of the other stuff that happened and the betrayal and all of that. Yes, I felt it. Like felt all those things and I worked through that, but I didn't it's like a different way of moving through it of like I need to almost separate these two things. I'm
Yeah.
going to process this over here. That's where my boundaries come in and all of that. And also there are parts of Steve that I can still have in my life and
Right.
love and figuring that out. Um, but yeah, you're 100% right. If like I, I think birthdays are a perfect example because so often we are just like, oh, I wish people would have remembered or done something. And I'm like, do you remember theirs all the time? Like,
Right.
it's hard to remember other people's birthdays. We have a lot of people in our lives, unless it's your kid or your partner, like outside of those family dynamics
Yeah.
or like best friends, it can be hard to remember that. And so I'm like, creating that space can feel really scary and it can feel very self-centered.
It
Like
does. I was just thinking that. I'm like, "Oh, that feels
I,
very selfish for me to want a birthday
yeah.
party for myself."
Hmm. But then, like, the giver in me is like, and also I'm providing a night out for people where they get to go have fun and have a good
Yes.
time. And yes, it is my birthday and we get to celebrate me, but also it's benefiting everybody. And I think that the more we realize that like the more space we create and allow to receive, like that's
Mhm.
not just benefiting you when you're receiving.
Right.
Givers get something out of that too.
I was
Like
gonna say, it's like when I'm
it's a
receiving, all
confidence boost.
the givers in my world are like excited because,
Yes.
you don't normally receive as a giver, you don't normally
Hmm.
receive. So when all the givers are like, woo, pile,
Yeah.
like a dog pile, that works.
Yeah. So I think there's like that we have to keep that in our heads, like that reminder of as I'm receiving, I am actually still giving because people who want to give are getting something out of it too. There is an
Yeah,
excitement that comes.
right.
There is a humility, there's a gratitude. Like whatever the feeling is we have when we're giving, we want that feeling.
Mhm.
We want to be supportive. And so it's a beautiful cycle, but it's somehow hard for us to erase or like to embrace
Right.
of all of this of like, no, 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 I have to be the one giving. No.
You
Create the
can give
space
and
to
you can
receive.
receive. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll be
You mentioned
okay.
you right. Okay. You mentioned you have a podcast with your ex-husband.
Mhm.
Um, with your current husband, how is your current husband like with all of these things going on?
Yeah.
Because I've talked about mine before, like not my ex-husband, but
Yeah.
my husband's ex-wife. Like we've went on vacation with
Oh,
her. We have a
oh,
great relationship with her. We meet up once a month. We have poker parties together. Like all of our
love
kids,
it.
like it's a big deal. And we get mostly dirty looks. They're like, oh my
Mhm.
God, out with the ex-wife. I'm like, you know what? Walk in my shoes and you'll know. And it's,
Yep. So
listen,
much easier.
it is. It's way easier.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't think that it would have be like this if we hadn't lost our daughter,
Mm.
but we're embracing it regardless,
Mhm.
because it feels right, it feels good, and it's a beautiful path forward, and it's showing our kids have aspirations to have relationships with their exes that we have with ours. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, that is a good step forward in my book. And, obviously I don't think everyone can have that. But how does your current husband navigate that with you, like with your
Yeah.
ex-husband?
He has been, definitely on board from day one, and in that, that means really getting uncomfortable with what you think because we've had this idea again of how our relationship should be with our ex, and then our partner comes in and they're like, "Well, you're why would you have this type of relationship with your ex?" Because they have the same idea, like, we all think, "Oh, you just cut it off and you're done, and that's
Right.
it." And also you have a kid, like,
I was
my
gonna
kid
say
was
you have a child
2.
together with him. So
Yeah,
yeah,
she was too. And so I think we get so stuck on the fact that it's an ex, you're done, and we forget that also they're still a part of your life. If you have children together, like it's basically a requirement. It's not, but it's there.
I mean, for the
Um,
benefit of the child, it should be, unless they're just
ideally,
extremely
unless it's
toxic.
yes, or there's danger, or there's
Yeah,
physical, like,
correct.
yes. Um, so Matt always says, he's like, I wanted to understand and I knew it was important to you. And he likes Steve. He knew Steve before Matt and I started dating. So he and Steve knew each
Oh,
other.
that's nice.
So that was kind of nice. But they weren't like they didn't know each other. They were just aware of each other
Sure.
basically. And so I think there was just this like, okay, well, let's see what it feels like to celebrate holidays together.
Yeah.
And then having follow-up conversations of like, were you really okay with this? Does this feel all right? And I think that it is all about having that communication
Mhm.
because you can have a good relationship and it not look like ours does. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be that you're hanging out or that you do things together all the time or whatever. And we don't do things all the time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like you have to have that communication. And Matt was willing to have that. And Matt was also willing to understand that I could love and support Steve and that didn't diminish my
Right.
relationship with him in
Right.
any way. That yes, I could love and care about Steve as I do, and also I can love and care about Matt in a totally different way.
Right.
And I always say at this point, I'm like, Steve's like a brother. He feels like I care about him that deeply. I know that's weird because I was married to him and have a kid with him, but also that's like the only way I can describe it to people.
Feelings change and stuff too, and
100%.
circumstances and situations change. And if you're
Yeah.
able to classify it in a specific way, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Rather than just, oh, he's the ex. Let's just stop all talk
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, and Matt can understand and feel that. And like Matt will openly say at this point, he's like, I love Steve. Like
Yeah.
I care about him. It's not like he worries about him, but like if something happens,
Right.
Steve got really sick with COVID and he was living by himself at the time. And he had like factors that made it it was a big deal. And I was so worried about him. And Matt, same way, like Matt was on board. Like I said, can he come live in our basement? Like for until he feels better, just in case something turns for the worst and he needs to get to the hospital. Because the doctors had told him, like, you are not okay. You need to, if anything changes, like you get to the hospital right away. But I'm like,
Yeah.
nobody's there. Nobody's at his
Right.
house. And so it's those moments and like Matt was like, yeah, he's welcome. He can sleep in the guest room downstairs and like it'll be totally fine. And I've just always like appreciated that about Matt. Like that's one of the ways Matt shows me love too
Mhm.
is by being okay with that and by checking himself and also checking me at times of like, hey, I understand this is the relationship we have, and also that didn't feel good, and be like, "Thank you for
Right.
telling me that. I don't have to do that." Like,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. And having those moments of just being I think it's about communication and hard conversations of like, "Hey, this didn't feel good to me," and saying, "Okay, like, how could we pivot this or make
Right.
this feel better?" Um, and owning that. So anyway, Matt's been a gem, and that's one of the reasons I think I was so drawn to him. Like I
Yeah.
literally the moment I met Matt was like, this is the man I'm marrying, and it was totally nuts. I used to make fun of people for that. Um, but we really are like such a good fit in figuring out things and having conversations that I think a lot of people are scared to have.
That that's a key point, is to find someone that you can have the conversations with, because there's so many relationships. I know for me, growing up, my parents were married, for like 30 some odd years before
Mhm.
my father passed away in 2005.
Mm,
And so I think they'd still be married today if he was still
yeah.
alive. And, but one thing my parents did when my brother and I were growing up is they never argued. They never argued in front of us. I should say,
Mm,
I'm gonna preface that. They never argued in front of us. So when I met my first husband, um, I just thought that marriages naturally just worked. I
mm.
didn't know the conflict issues in marriages and that you have to work through those. So I'm like, when would pick a fight with me, I would be like, I
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I physically don't know what to do because I
Yeah.
never witnessed this with my parents. They always made sure because they didn't want us to see my brother and I to see them fighting or arguing or
Yeah.
whatever, having a disagreement in front of us. So, but I was shook when I got married
Mhm.
and we had our first fight. I'm like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how to do this, which is just communication.
Mhm.
But I was
And
ill
I
prepared for it.
yeah, and I think this is a perfect example of why it's important for our kids to see us work through hard
Yeah,
things. Like, in our grief, like, we don't have to just pretend to be strong all the time.
right.
For our kids, they need to see I mean, it's not to say that they need to see everything, but they need to understand that
It's
it's
okay.
okay. It's okay to not agree all the time. It's okay to feel crappy and have hard days and for huge life-changing events to rock our world. It's
Yeah.
okay because then when that happens to them, they're not going to put on themselves so like, "Well, what is like, no, this isn't what we do. No, this is
Be like,
normal."
"Oh, it must be me because I don't know how to handle
Yes.
this," and that's what I thought.
Mhm.
Like, I am
Yes.
the problem here because I don't know how to handle this situation. I
Mhm.
don't know, it must be me causing this, must be me doing this. Well, I've later learned, obviously, since it wasn't, I just, now know how to
Yeah.
communicate and all that stuff. How is your daughter handling all of this? Because that
I
always
mean,
fascinates me with the kids.
yeah. This is the thing I always say about kids is I'm like, we don't know until they're adults.
True, like, they're
It
gonna have trauma no matter what, it's gonna happen,
yes,
but
like, I don't know, but from right now, as it seems, she is a kid that sees life in so many different ways and that there's so many options and avenues open to her, and that she's going to be loved and accepted no matter what that looks like. And if she makes big mistakes, she's still going to be loved and accepted and like all those
Yeah.
things because she knows our story. She knows what happened. She knows, like not every detail. She doesn't need to,
Sure.
but there's an understanding that there's love and respect for people
Mhm.
and that she gets to love and respect herself. And we are here cheering her on because our life didn't look how we thought it was going to look. And we know there's no one way that life should look or needs to look. And so therefore she gets to figure that out for herself. And so those are things that like I watch and I get so excited about with her. Is that she has this understanding and sees that you still get to opt in to love where it makes sense and works for you. It's not a safe place for everybody to stay
Right.
friends with their ex. Um,
No, it's not good for
yeah,
everyone, but
no,
if it
and
works,
always
explore
preface
it.
that,
Like,
like, we get it on the other side of that too, like, we have a very different relationship with Matt's ex-wife, and it's what's best and healthiest for everybody.
yeah.
But, so she seems good, she's not afraid to, like, vocalize, "Hey, I don't wanna do this thing," or whatever, and even when it comes down to impacting, like, she'll always say, "Well, I'm worried, it's gonna make dad feel bad, or that I'm gonna make you feel bad," or whatever. I'm like, "No, you get to have a voice and speak up, you're not responsible for how we feel. Like,
Right.
yes, you're going to be kind and all those things. Like, don't just be a jerk, but also you
Don't
get to
be a
have
people
clarity
pleaser
about what
either.
feels
Yeah.
right for you. Yes. And so I think that's one of the things that I've watched. And as a parent, that's kind of hard sometimes to be like, no, but like my way is right, or you should want whatever.
Right.
But it's such a freeing thing to watch your kid and be like, okay, this isn't about me. This is purely about what she wants and needs in this moment. And hoping that that drives her forward in like the best way possible, like I'm like I hope that that sets her up in different ways than it's set up like myself and
Yeah.
also the majority of women that I work with.
Yeah.
Of I'm not just going to lean into this. I'm not necessarily all of the problem. Yes, I'm going to own my crap and understand I'm not perfect. And also, um, it's usually not about me. It's usually all the things that we go through, it's not about me.
Right.
So anyway, she's good. She's thriving. She's 14 and doing her
Oh,
thing.
oh
And
my gosh. I think the
um,
last time I saw her, well, I haven't physically
yeah,
seen her, but like on socials, she was just
mhm,
little.
she's a bitty. So
Oh my,
yeah, she's fun. It's been fun. Um, So yeah, as far as I can tell, we're doing okay so far. And again, I know there will be stuff, and
right.
that's okay. Like, it's okay. None of us know what we're doing and none of us do it perfectly. We're just doing what we can. And that's something I own too and tell her, like, I'm not doing this right. I have made mistakes. There are things you are going to look back and be like, why did you do that? And you're going to be angry for me for it. And that's okay. You can tell me, like, I I didn't do it perfect.
Yeah.
Um, I want to have those conversations so that we can work through that and continue forward. So, yeah, that's where we're at. We're
Oh, I
hoping
love
for
it.
the best.
Right. Right. Hoping for the best. And,
Not going to be perfect.
it's not too
So,
much trauma that they're going to have to unpack when they're an adult, but, you know,
it's there.
it's there. Compliments. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I have had a blast chatting with you, and hearing your story and talking about all the things. Grief plays such an integral part in everyone's life.
Mm,
And I think, before before we had lost our daughter, I don't think I focused on the grief as much. I didn't realize how much grief there was, or
yeah.
like moments and moments and moments of grief that are unprocessed in our world until we're
Mhm.
forced to focus on it and navigate it and go through it. And I don't know, it's been a fascinating journey. And then
Yes.
hearing other people and their journey that they go through and the
Mhm.
thoughts that they've come up with and the action plans and all of those things with the grief and stuff. So, kudos, kudos, because, I mean, you're setting the path for yourself.
Mhm.
And you're not only setting it for yourself, but you're also setting it for your daughter,
Yeah.
which is a byproduct of setting it for yourself. And a lot of people don't realize that. They make
Yeah.
choices for themselves without understanding the implications that are there for the children or the other people, the other small ones watching in.
Yeah.
Uh, because they're
And
always looking up to us.
and I think like one thing of what you just said is it's like I think people think, well, I have to make choices based on what I think is best for my kid. And I'm always like, making the choice that is best for you in that moment is what is best for your kid.
Yeah.
Like you choosing to take the time for yourself. And I think this is the biggest thing for moms when we're grieving or going through something hard is, well, I have to power through. And it's like we talked about, like, no, like your kid needs to know it's okay to have big feelings and to feel big feelings when you go through something hard.
Yeah. And to
And,
take time for yourself when you're
and
going through those big things.
yes, show them, model this. They want to support you in those things just as much as you want to support them. And so creating that space. And then the days they're a mess and having a breakdown or whatever,
Being
you
there for
get
them. Yeah.
you get to embrace that and be like, listen, like, yeah, what do you need today? Do you need to sit in your room all day and do nothing? Do you need to like go take a a bath, like whatever? Like, what is it you need? And you get to support them in learning that. So I think that that's huge of like,
Yeah.
it's like such a weird dynamic, but it's powerful. You're
It
doing
is.
good things for your kids in embracing your emotions.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
teaching them how to honor their emotions, like how
Yes.
to respect that they have emotions. Because
Yes.
most of the time, like, it wasn't that my parents said emotions were bad, but it's something I picked up along in the childhood. It was like, oh, I have to be
Hmm.
strong. Like I can
Yep.
show no emotions
Hmm.
except happiness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything that they said because they supported me through whatever, but
Yes.
somewhere along the line, I picked up this that I can't cry, I can't, anger
Hmm.
is a taboo,
Yep.
all of these things. And it's probably, a mixture of everything in my world at that time,
100%.
society.
Hmm.
But it was interesting. So
Yeah.
for me doing this podcast and how many times I've cried live on this podcast are baffling to me because I think I've shed more tears on this podcast than I did my entire childhood,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. Hmm.
which is insane.
Yeah.
But I guess I wouldn't change it for the world because
Mm-mm.
it's been so much fun. If you could give our listeners one tidbit of advice, what would you tell them?
That, I mean, embrace those feelings. Like, embrace whatever it is you are feeling and then utilize it to connect back to you of like understanding these feelings are information about me. They don't mean I am stuck in this place. They don't mean anything wrong or bad or anything. They're information. And so understanding that information is the most powerful thing that we can have in our lives. So embrace the things you are feeling and acknowledge them and then be willing to act on what it's telling you on the other side you need. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And you said you have a podcast and you're on social
Yeah.
media, all of the
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
You do coaching
So,
stuff too?
yes. Yes. So you can find my podcast. It's called Husband in Law. It's on any podcasting platform. I always say start with episode 1. We go through and share like our whole story from the beginning to the end. And it's kind of cool because you hear it in the words of me, my ex-husband, and my current husband. The three of us actually host the
Okay.
podcast together. And then you can find me at Hey Jessica Frew on social media platforms. I am most active on Instagram, so that's the best place to go find me. And if you are processing through betrayal, we just opened up, I guess this will be a few months into it, but a membership for women who are experiencing betrayal in their lives, any form of betrayal, self betrayal, whatever it looks like. It's called the Betrayed Badass Society. Please come join us and you can feel seen and heard. Like we talked about needing to feel less alone. These are the places to go find that. I do offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching as well. So if you're ever interested in those things, just reach out and let me know. But those are the best places to find me. Yeah,
Fantastic. I love it. Like, go check her out. Go see all of her things. Go listen to the podcast. I think it's
yeah,
extremely needed, extremely helpful, and showing a different dynamic in the world today than what we've all grown up with. So I love it.
100%. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Thank you so much for being here, and I will see everyone else in the next episode. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.